Okay. It's okay. Record light on. Alright, here we go. This is something that my friend Brian brought up, and it was an email he received, and I find it very interesting. What happens is they're saying that the government really messed up by giving the banks that $700 billion. I've been on my soapbox about that. I've talked about why I think it's a three-way split between the government, the bankers, and the borrowers, with the borrowers bearing the majority of the blame. I went through that enough times that I don't really care to revisit that whole thing again. I'll discuss it individually with anybody who wishes to discuss it, but I don't really care to make a whole video about that. What I will say, though, is that the email Brian received was very interesting. If Congress had thought about this a little bit better, they could have made an arrangement where there are approximately 40 million Americans between the ages 50 and 70 still working full-time. If you offered those 40 million people $1 million each to retire now, don't look back. Close a book on your pension, close a book on, but you take $1 million cash, and that's more than what your pension would have been anyway in most cases. With very few exceptions, so maybe they wouldn't all take it if they happen to be the exception to that. So alright, here you go. Let's just say hypothetically 40 million people are given $1 million to retire, and they're between the ages 50 and 70. And the conditions would be, if you have an outstanding mortgage, you got to pay it off. If you buy a new car within the next 5 years, it's got to be an American car. So it's got to be either a General Motors, a Ford, or a Chrysler product. And if you take this deal, that would sell up to 40 million new vehicles. That would, so General Motors and Chrysler, who are struggling right now, would, that's partially their own fault too. That's another soapbox. I won't go there right now. But that's something that could happen. 40 million mortgages, or up to 40 million mortgages, would be paid off. That would get the banks out of trouble. 40 million jobs would be available to people who are just entering the workforce now. I think that would be a great thing. And it wouldn't really be 40 million because not everybody would take that deal. But those are round figures. That's what it could do for this country. I find that very interesting. I really do. And that's something that I think Congress could have visited 6 months ago before they just gave in to the banks. Pretty soon the car manufacturers were just as anxious. I got another peeve. How about the oil companies? The oil companies were boasting profits in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 billion some quarters. Well, in order to buy gasoline, you must own an automobile, right? So, in order to put gasoline in an automobile, you must purchase an automobile. I think everybody could follow that. I'm not trying to be Mr. Rogers here. So, why doesn't the companies that are making $20+ billion a quarter throw a little kickback to the automakers? Doesn't have to be, you don't have to bail them completely out, but if people stop buying automobiles, they're not going to buy gasoline. Of course, it would take a long time for that to really come to fruition, but no, I think that would be a good start, that the automakers could be partially bailed out by a stimulus package, not like the government is working on right now, but like I said, paying 40 billion people, 40 million people, a billion, wow, 40 million people, $1 million to retire, buy an American car, and pay off their mortgage. That would have helped the banks and the automakers. But I think as far as the automakers go, the oil companies could contribute a little bit there too. Alright, so that's what's going on right now. Let me shut this off.